In the fall of 2007, Denise Winters was working at the registrar's office at Stanford University as a student services officer. One of her duties was handling forms that students filled out in order to take a leave of absence from the university. The forms asked students to provide some information as to why they were seeking to take time off from college. Most of them wrote about sick relatives, medical problems, feeling overwhelmed. "Don't write a novel," she'd tell them. "In the end, it's your business." Still, even by that standard, the reason given by one student that fall was unusually terse. "What's a 23andMe?" she remembers asking. No one knows exactly how many Stanford students have left the university to join or start companies in information technology or biotech without attaining their degrees. The university doesn't collect data on reasons students leave, which itself is a holdover from a time when dropping out was a blot on your CV, not something you trumpeted all over CNBC. Stanford administrators say the numbers are probably higher than at other universities of Stanford's caliber, but they're not huge. Still, that fairly contained number of dropouts has had an outsized purchase on the way the public imagines the tech industry and the whiz kids who have shaped its most recent iteration. You weave one sort of legend when you say you are Harvard educated. But there's a certain other kind of legend you weave, only if you can say that you dropped out of Harvard. Elizabeth Holmes, the former CEO of the biotech startup Theranos, who is currently on trial for wire fraud and conspiracy in San Jose court, seems to have understood that better than anyone. She's America's youngest female billionaire, a CNN headline declared in October 2014, and a dropout. Almost every fawning profile published over the years mentioned the fact that Holmes had dropped out of Stanford, perhaps more religiously than they would have mentioned Stanford if she'd actually graduated. It felt like another item on her CV, and almost every article referenced a rogues gallery of famous prior dropouts, whose memories Holmes certainly meant to invoke when she decided to leave the farm prematurely. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. In fact, Holmes had left Stanford a little more than 10 years before the CNN headline and raised $1 million from her former neighbor in Los Altos Hills, Tim Draper, who just happens to be one of Silicon Valley's most well-regarded venture capitalists. Oh, and some money from her Stanford friend's dad, who ran a medical device company in Taiwan. Oh, and some from her family. Calling Holmes a dropout was both accurate and an object lesson in how two actions can resemble each other but mean completely different things. There's an interesting dual consciousness at work when investors, the press, and the public fawn over dropouts like these, but also worry about a dropout epidemic among very different kinds of kids. Somewhat hilariously, much of the recent hand-wringing about a dropout epidemic came about due to a report by the Gates Foundation. But that cognitive dissonance is probably the point. Don't do what Bill Gates did, kids, unless you're Bill Gates. Dropping out of an elite university to start a company means tapping into a narrative. It's a nice way of associating with a prestigious place while also not really associating with it. It's elitism that very visibly snubs the elite, or perhaps even better, snubbing the elite while nevertheless basking in its glow. But it's worth asking, what kind of an education is dropping out? Because the quintessential tech wunderkind, as portrayed by the media, noticeably doesn't not go to college. He or she goes to college in a new way, by showing up, taking a few classes, making a few friends, and then dropping out. As we shall see, in Silicon Valley in particular, the act of dropping out conjures a set of associations that have more to do with 60s counterculture than with entrepreneurial success, but which share with the famous tech dropouts a vocabulary of unconventional thinking and independence. It also creates a challenge for historians who want to show what influences shape the current crop of founders. There have been professors at Stanford who taught nearly every technologist who graduated from the institution, so it's safe to assume that some aspect of how they have thought about computers has influenced their former students. The founders of Google credit Terry Winograd with shaping the way their famous venture turned out. How does this equation change when the encounter with academic thought is less about getting trained and more about a momentary utilitarian flyby? When the university is less about patient incubation of talent than a brief pollination with prestige and some cool ideas? This chapter provides the basis for all the terms explored in the following chapters. How do concepts like communication or content function when the person using them has encountered their extremely long and rich histories in the context of a general ed course, talked them over with roommates, and then left the university to figure out how to make credit card payments easier? How do these concepts work when you've basically gotten the gist, but perhaps not much more than the gist?